In this tutorial, we are going to be looking at the body fluid compartment. What do you understand by the word body fluid compartment? The word fluid simply means water. And when we say body, this simply refers to the physical structure of a human or animal, including body organs, tissues, and the system itself. And the word compartment simply refers to the distinct section or division within a layer or a space or a structure. So when we talk about the fluid compartment, we are referring to the different areas inside the body where there is a fluid or where fluids are located, like inside the cell or around them. And the human body is about 50 to 70% and roughly 60% made up of water. And the amount of water can vary based on different factors like the age, sex, that is the gender, and body composition. Based on age, what we have here, we have the infant. In this case, the infant, which is the newborn babies, they have approximately 75 to 78% made up of water. And what about the adult? Adult is approximately 50 to 70% made up of water. And based on gender, we have the males. The males are about 55 to 65%. What about the females? In this case, the females, we have about 45 to 60%. In terms of body composition, we have the lean tissues and we have the fatty tissues. Lean tissues have more water than the fatty tissues, so individuals with higher muscle mass tend to have higher percentage of water in their body. Here I'm going to provide you with some important points which I believe is going to be important and useful for us throughout this video. Number one, we have the ICF, we have the ECF, TCF, TBW. And in this case, the ICF simply stands for intracellular fluid, ECF stands for extracellular fluid, and TCF transcellular fluid. The TBW simply stands for total body weight. Let's write it down together. We say the first one is ICF, which simply stands for intracellular fluid. And we have the ECF, extracellular fluid. We also have the IF, which simply stands for interstitial fluid. Next thing we have is TBW, which is total body weight. I need you to find a sheet of paper and a pen and write everything you see here down, as we are going to be using it throughout this video. And also we have some mathematical operations that involve just addition and subtraction, which can help us to understand. Because you can be asked to find the total weight. If you are asked to find the total weight, we're simply going to add the ICF, which is the intracellular fluid. We're going to add that with the ECF, which is the extracellular fluid. And if you add these two, they're going to result in our total body weight. And apart from that, what if you're asked to find the ECF? Notice that ICF plus our ECF plus the ECF we have here is the same thing as TW. This is the same thing as writing 20 plus 13, which is simply going to be 50. In this case, what if you ask to find the ECF? Notice that here we have ECF. For us to find ECF, we're going to make it to be the standard formula. That is for us to find our extracellular fluid. We're simply going to add our interstitial fluid, that is IF. We are going to plus that with our plasma volume. So what do we have on the list? Next thing we have, which is very important, which we need to put at the back of our mind, is the cations. Always note that our cations are always positively charged, and apart from cations, we have our anions. And anions are always negatively charged. What I have here on my screen right now is a roughly sketch of the cell. And if you look at this is what I call the cell. And this outside is the ICF, which is an aqueous environment. Because you know that in our cell membrane, that is the lipid bilayer which separate the ECF and the ICF. Inside of the cell, which is the cytoplasm, which has the water we call the cytosol, is an aqueous environment. And outside, this represents our outside of the cell, and this is the inside of the cell. This is also another cell. This is the inside of the cell, and this is outside of the cell. Here we have the veins, and we also have, it is also an aqueous environment. And this dot which you have inside are the water molecules and other solid substances which you have inside of the veins. Alright, considering the ICF and the ECF, let's say here we have a cell. Everything we have here, inside of the cell we call it ICF, and outside of the cell we call it ECF. If you have to consider the ECF and ICF, what is in between the two is what we call the cell membrane, and that is what separates the intracellular fluid and the extracellular fluid. Let's take an example. Let's say we have a matured adult, and that matured adult, he have a total body weight, and his total body weight is simply going to be 60%. Notice that if that is the case, therefore, most of the times, numbers of ICF is higher, and the number is higher than the numbers of ACF. That matured human, which you have with total body weight of 60%, his ICF is simply going to be 2/3, and that is the ICF, and his ECF is simply going to be 1/3. Since we have 60%, therefore, his ICF, since it's 2/3, is simply going to be 40%. And the ECF, which is the extracellular fluid, is simply going to be 20%. 20 plus 40 is simply going to be 60%. What I'm trying to explain here is this. In a cytoplasm of a cell, which we have the ICF, the volume of ICF is normally higher than the volume of ECF. And again, if you take a look at it here, let's take an example. Let's say here we have our body fluid compartment. Body fluid compartment is simply categorized into three main compartments. The first one we said is intracellular fluid. And the second one we have is extracellular fluid. And the last one is transcellular fluid. Looking at the first one, which says intercellular fluid. When we say intercellular fluid, this simply refers to as anything that happens or exists within a cell. The fluid in the cytoplasm is called the cytosol. Next, we have what we call the extracellular fluid. The extracellular fluid is simply the fluid found outside of the cell in your body. It includes fluid like blood plasma and interstitial fluid which surround the cell. And the extracellular fluid is further categorized into two. We have the first one, which we call the intravascular and the interstitial. Here we have the intravascular, and this we have the interstitial. Let's take a quick revision once more. Let's assume here we have what we call the cell, and here we have the nucleus, and here we have another cell. We have the nucleus, and this is what we call the cell membrane or the plasma membrane. In this case, we're going to have a vein which passes here. When we talk about the extracellular fluid, we have the intravascular, which are the fluid which is found inside of these veins. We call them the intravascular. And here, the interstitial, those are what we found at the ECF. But notice that both the vein and the interstitial fluid or the ECF fluid are all extracellular, are all found outside of the cell, because anything that is found inside of the cell or cytoplasm of the cell is what we call the ICF. Another main component which I need us to understand at this point is the idea of intravascular fluid and interstitial fluid. When we take the interstitial fluid, feel free to jot it down. Interstitial. This is the same thing as the water which is found at the ECF level. And when we say it from the word vascular, which are the veins, the intravascular the intravascular fluid are simply the fluid which is found in the blood vessels. And here in the roughly sketched diagram which I provide us, as you can see here we have the cell with the cell membrane, and we have the ECF, the water in the, what do you call it, the water outside of the cell. Another name for it, we call it the interstitial. While the one inside our blood vessels, we call it the intravascular fluid. Those are the two different, and they are very important in order to understand this topic. In simple terms, you can also call the intravascular fluid to be the plasma. It is the fluid component of the blood that circulates within the blood vessels. It contains water, electrolytes, protein, hormones, and other solid substances into the blood vessels. The main function of it includes transporting, which is a nutrient, gases, hormones, waste product throughout the body in order to maintain the blood pressure and contribute for the immune responses. And when we talk about the interstitial fluid, which are this is the fluid that surrounds the cells and the tissues in the body. It is found in the space between the cells and the blood vessels in the tissues. Its main function is to facilitate the exchange of substances between the blood vessels and the cell. And the last thing we have here is the transcellular fluid. This transcellular fluid, this simply refers to any fluid that is not contained within the cell. They are simply specialized fluids found in the specific compartment of the body, like the cerebrospinal fluid and the synovial fluid, which is serving unique functions in various bodily systems. Now let's look at the movement of water from the plasma, which is known as the intravascular fluid, to the interstitial fluid, which is known as the ECF, through a process called the filtration and reabsorption, which is regulated by the balance of hydrostatic pressure and the osmotic pressure, across the capillaries. In this tutorial, next thing we're going to be looking at is the movement of water from the plasma to the ECF, which is extracellular fluid. Here is a roughly sketch of capillary. And here from the inside, we have a roughly drawing of blood cells and some dissolved solids. And this process, let's call it the filtration. In this case, if you notice here at the capillary, we have two openings, which is up and down here. So, and let's have this particular portion here, to be our interstitial space. And here we're going to have our cell with the cell membrane, and here is the nucleus. So if there is higher pressure here inside of the cell or inside of the capillary, so water particles tend to move out, facing out of the cell, and this process we call it the hydrostatic. As the pressure increases, it keeps moving the fluid out of the cell, or out of the, it keeps moving, water-soluble substances out of the capillary. And this process we call it defiltration. When it bring it out of here, it actually ends up here, which we call it the interstitial space. This represents the pressure exerted by the fluid, which is the blood, against the capillary wall, right? Pushing the fluid out into the interstitial space, and this is the interstitial space, because all the fluid are going to, as time goes on, are going to get out of this pipe and come here. Here we have another process which we call it the reabsorption. In this case, let's have a roughly sketch or roughly drawing of protein, typically albumin. If you notice here, we also have two openings, which is up and down from here. So in this case, this represents the hydrostatic pressure that is moving at this side, coming out of this pause, hydrostatic pressure. So in this case, the hydrostatic pressure will keep on pushing the water out. So the water will keep on moving out due to the filtration movement. So here we're going to have, let's say here we have the water. Well, let's put it in white. It will keep on moving out due to the hydrostatic. And here outside here we have what we call the interstitial surrounding. Fluid from the plasma gets filtered through the capillary membrane to form the interstitial fluid. The capillary membrane have pores. These are the pores which it has that let the solid go through except for the protein. And here we have our protein which we call the albumin. Because they are too large, so they don't pass through the membrane, they stay in the plasma. The reason is that that is one of the reasons our interstitial spaces here have a little protein. And inside the plasma, we have a large number of or large volume of protein. Here we are simply going to have osmotic pressure, which is being created by the presence of protein. At this point, the osmotic pressure will keep on moving inward. If you notice the hydrostatic, which is this, it's moving outward. That is the solid water molecules and other solid substances is moving it outward. But at this point, we have the osmotic. It's moving, that is the osmotic pressure. Here we have, as I said, we have the osmotic pressure created by the presence of the protein in the plasma. So therefore, water, due to the osmotic pressure, will keep moving inward. At this point, if you notice here, the hydrostatic moves outward, and here it moves it inward. At this point, it maintains the fluid balances between the plasma and the initial fluid. And this is it for this problem. I hope you find it helpful. Feel free to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching.